Yes, we are going right to the other end of life at the moment. How many economists are in the room today? Hands up if you're an economist. There's one hand down. Oh, a couple of hands. 2 hands. Okay. There's not many. That's a shame, but I'm not really surprised. The practicing economists are probably somewhere back at the office, hunched over a computer, looking at data, analysing graphs, maybe even graphs like this. This graph shows us what we're hearing about in the media a lot these days, and that is that as a community, we're staring down the barrel of a funding shortfall in this country, which is probably we're going to feel the pain from about 2025. And the reason is this: you can see on the graph, the top line is the total population, the blue line at the top, and the red line further down is the total number of people who are employed and therefore paying taxes. And as you can see, the 2 lines are diverging quite dramatically as time goes on, and that's the problem. We've got less people funding the needs of the population, and that means that we're going to be in trouble in terms of having enough money to pay for the health and the social services and education, etc., that we've come to expect. And it also means that we've got less money available to support those people who really can't help themselves, like the elderly, poor, the severely disabled, and so on. So this is actually quite a worry. And why am I showing you this? Because it's not just a problem for economists or politicians or for the government, it's a problem for all of us because we're running out of money. And the main issue here, I think, is that often we're reacting far too late to trying to solve problems when it's less effective and more costly. We keep sending ambulances to the bottom of the cliff to pick up the pieces of people after the problems have escalated, instead of building fences at the top of the cliff and keeping people back away from the cliff. That's called prevention. And that's where the brain comes in, and most particularly the developing brain. Science has shown that prevention really is better than cure. It's not just an old saying, it is true. And it's particularly true when we're talking about the human brain, and it's true when we're talking about the costs of health and social services. And it took a Nobel Prize winning economist who listened to neuroscientists to point this out. So what's the relevance for us here? Well, it's the fact that neuroscience tells us that it's in the early years of life that the architecture of the brain is built and the foundations of later life health and well-being are laid down. Now, today we've heard a lot about brain plasticity right throughout life, and it's true. It's also true that the brain is most plastic in those very early years, which means that the experiences that we have in those very early years of life can really set us up well for life. We can really gain a lot of benefits at that stage and really be set up well, or not. We can actually be set up very badly for life if things don't go so well. This is a slide that shows the stages of early brain development. We know that there's very important things going on pre-birth, during pregnancy, and that then there's a great deal of brain construction that goes on up to about the age of 3 or 4. We also know that the early life experiences of young children are highly predictive of later life health and well-being outcomes. That adverse experiences have been associated with higher levels of problems in adulthood, such as mental illness, drug and alcohol abuse, child abuse, criminality, as well as many common and costly health problems like heart disease and diabetes. And this is of interest to economists because there is a cost burden and an impact on GDP that comes with higher health and social problems. So I'm going to show now a short video clip developed by the Benevolent Society on the developing brain.
Up to 80% of our brain develops within the first 2 years of life, more than 90% by our 3rd birthday. In these critical early years, All the experiences we have, both positive and negative, play a vital part in shaping the neurological structure of our developing brain. And that affects our learning capacity, our behaviours, our physical, emotional and mental health.
So we think about the first 3 years of life, which is when the brain is growing at its most rapid rate, really as a foundational period. So a lot of the wiring, a lot of the connections between nerve cells that we need for healthy functioning are literally laid down during those rapid periods of growth. We're essentially born with our full complement of neurons. What literally happens as a result of interaction or stimulation, so input, is the development of connections, which are called synapses between nerve cells. Pathways that are about regulating feelings, pathways that are about understanding human interaction, attention, learning, memory. All these pathways are literally laid down like railway tracks in the first 3-4 years of life. Early infant brain development is very much shaped by the quality of emotional interaction between the parent or carer and the infant. And in healthy situations, there is sharing of positive emotional interactions, if you like, so positive emotional states between the parent and the infant.
Attachment bonding happens as the parent becomes attuned to the baby and the baby becomes attuned to the parent. And we want there to be, we kind of create a rhythm between the parent and the child, sometimes referred to as serve and return.
What happened? Yeah, what happened? What's happening today?
So the baby serves to the parent a smile. Makes a googling sound. The parent returns something. What they return is, "Oh, you're so cute. Oh, I love it when you make that noise." And the baby kind of begins to smile and and in the smile, they again serving back up something to the parent, and the parent responds. So there's a serve and return, but like a tennis match, I suppose. At that moment, the baby is learning about this thing called attachment. It's absolutely critical for them to be able to thrive.
It's almost impossible not to smile when you see a baby smiling like that, isn't it? So that video clip, I think, is available on YouTube, and there's more to it. If you want to have a look, you could go through the Benevolent Society website as well. Here's a slide of the brains of 2 different children at age 3. One who has developed normally, and the other who's suffered, sadly, extreme neglect. This is an extreme difference, and it illustrates the point that crucial neural connections fail to form or wither away when young children suffer toxic stress or neglect, and they fail to develop the skills needed for learning, such as memory, the ability to concentrate and regulate their emotions, and social and communication skills. When babies and young children are exposed to stress, such as violence between the adults in their home, the architecture of the brain itself is compromised. We didn't know this before, but we know it now. These particular developmental gaps are critical as they're the basis of all learning and development. And the disadvantage gap, we now know, just continues to get wider as the child grows, as is shown by this graphic. So, I have primary school principals saying to me, we need to do something earlier because by the time they start school, it's too late, right? It's just that by then so much of the architecture has been laid down. This is a graph by the economist James Heckman. And it was Heckman who first showed, through a randomised controlled trial, that if we invest small amounts of money to support kids from disadvantaged backgrounds, then 40 years later, these kids are going to grow up to be more likely to be in jobs, earning money, paying taxes, and less likely to be on the streets, homeless, mentally ill, drug and alcohol affected, or in jail. Heckman showed that for every dollar spent early on helping disadvantaged kids and their young parents who were struggling, there was a return on investment of between $13 and $17 for every dollar, which was far more than what the stock market delivered during that time, which was between $5 and $6. So it was a pretty good investment. This study was done with poor kids in Chicago, and for this work, Heckman received the Nobel Prize. On this slide, you can see how the return on investment is much higher the earlier we invest, and then it sort of tapers off later on. Since this work, there's been other economic analyses done. For example, a 20-year study of poor kids in Jamaica, which showed that those that got help early, when they were adults, their earnings were boosted by 25%. And in Canada, they worked out that for every 1% drop in developmental vulnerability in young children, for every 1% drop in levels of vulnerability, there was a 1% increase in the GDP of the country through the life of those individuals who were not developmentally vulnerable. So there is that direct effect on our economic well-being. This table summarises some of the benefits of prevention and early intervention, but in Australia, we're still reacting too late, far too late, with serious consequences. Despite 2 decades of relative prosperity in this country, the rates of key health and social problems has just continued to increase. I haven't got time to go through all those stats, but you would be shocked. Research shows that adverse experiences in early childhood will affect children's mental and physical health and development and their future life outcomes. And we know from research that many adult health and social problems have their origins in early childhood and will be transmitted across the generations. If home life is stressful because of issues such as poverty or mental health problems or violence, then children are likely to begin school behind their peers and they'll continue to be at a disadvantage through life because it's much harder to correct through remedial action later on. It's possible, but it's very costly and tends to be less effective. We've got this wonderful window of opportunity when the kids are young. The good news is that there are more programs now being developed based on neuroscience, knowledge and mindfulness for young children and their parents, programs which have the capacity to regrow the functioning of the brain, such as the Shaping Brains programs developed by the Benevolent Society, which are designed for young children and their parents and are showing good results with helping kids to focus and to concentrate, to be able to regulate their emotions and develop the social skills and communication that they need so that they can engage in learning. And some preschools are starting to use some of these techniques as well in helping traumatised children recover from the damage to their developing brain. But the truth is that the number of children who can access this kind of help in the time where we've got that window of opportunity is tiny. Much more needs to be done for the many kids who miss out. And we need to help young parents as well, because as you saw on that video clip, a lot of that brain development in those very earliest of years occurs in the relationship between the parent and the child. That's how we're wired as people. That's how the child's brain grows. And so parents, particularly parents who are struggling, really need and deserve that help. A small investment early will pay big dividends later in life. And this graph shows how the return on investment just keeps going up as you get older. When it comes to brain development, prevention is a powerful thing. With this new knowledge, we can prevent or reduce the impact of many health and mental health problems later in life. At the moment, we're investing very little actually in prevention research. So if we can increase that research, we can do this even better. Not just to improve our lives as individuals, but also to improve the social and economic well-being of our whole country. For a relatively small investment early, we can deliver massive economic and social benefits to us all, saving a lot of money which is now being wasted on late reactions. To do this, though, we need to think long-term with our social and health investments, not just within the 3 or 4 year political cycle. For me, this is a moral issue because we know how to improve lives and we're not doing it. But it's also an issue for us as taxpayers. I want to know that my money is being invested wisely. This is doable, but we need economists and politicians to listen to neuroscientists, and because there's now so much evidence that investment in the early childhood years and support for parenting is where we will get the biggest returns on our investment and break the cycle of disadvantage. Now, the tree is up there to symbolise prevention, and I'll just end with an old African proverb that goes like this. The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The next best time to plant a tree is right now. So right now, we as a community are shaping the children who will become the adults in 20 years' time, 2034. Now, we know this is a good investment. It's not a risky investment. It's a safe bet. But the question really is, are we investing now for positive outcomes or for negative ones? Thank you very much.
By the time we're 60, more than 90% of us will have known someone close to us who has suffered from some sort of a neurological disorder.
You all know you're not going to live forever. There's only one way into this life and one way out.
I cannot prove to you anymore that anything is possible.
Talk about the marvelous thing that we now understand about our brains.
It gets so much better.